Queen Zarathix stood alone in her private room looking at the glowing picture of Captain Jake Miller. The image showed his warm brown eyes and that crook smile she had grown to love so much. Her 6 arms shook as she touched the cold crystal surface. 3 months had passed since his ship exploded in the dark space near the edge of their galaxy, and she still could not believe he was gone. The Velthari people were very old and wise. They had lived among the stars for thousands of years before humans even learned to make fire. They could change living things with their science and bend space itself to their will. But Jake had been different from all the other creatures they met in space. Most aliens showed fear when they saw the tall silver beings with their many arms and glowing eyes. Others tried to hide their terror behind fake smiles and careful words. Jake had looked at her with real interest, and something else she had never seen before in alien eyes. Zarathix remembered their first meeting 6 months ago. Jake had come to her throne room as part of a human trade mission. The other humans in his group had bowed low and spoken in quiet voices. Jake had walked right up to her massive throne and said hello like they were old friends. When her guards moved to stop him, she had raised one hand. Something about this small human with his strange round ears and flat face made her curious. "Your Majesty," Jake had said with that easy smile, "I brought you something from Earth." He had pulled out a small blue flower from his jacket. "It's called a forget-me-not. My grandmother always said they were the most beautiful flowers because they reminded people of love even when everything else was dark." No one had ever given Zarathix a gift that was not gold or jewels or weapons. This tiny blue thing had more meaning than all the treasure in her vaults. She had kept it in a special container where it would never die. Even now it sat on her desk next to Jake's picture. Their friendship had grown slowly. Jake came back many times with his trade ships. He brought her music from Earth and told her stories about human cities and oceans and mountains. She showed him the crystal gardens of her homeworld and the great libraries where all Velthari knowledge was kept. They would walk together through her ship talking about everything and nothing. The day Zarathix knew she loved Jake was when he found her crying over reports of a plague on one of her colony worlds. Thousands of her people were dying, and her doctors could not find a cure. Jake had sat beside her without saying anything for a long time. Then he had put his small human hand on one of her large silver ones. "We'll figure it out together," he had said. "Humans are pretty good at solving problems when we work with friends." He had been right. Human doctors working with Velthari scientists had found the cure in 2 weeks. Jake had stayed on her ship the whole time, making sure she ate and slept. While her people worked, he had held her hand when the news came that the last patient was healed. That night she had told him she loved him. The words had come out in her own language first, then in his. Jake had looked surprised, then happy, then worried. "Zara," he had said, "I love you too, but this is going to cause problems for both our people." He had been right about that as well. The Velthari nobles had been angry that their queen would choose an alien mate. The human government had called Jake back to Earth 3 times for meetings about proper relations with alien rulers. Neither of them had cared. Love was stronger than politics or fear, or the opinions of others. Jake had moved his things to her ship and become her official consort. They had been planning to announce their engagement to both their peoples. Jake had wanted a simple ceremony with just their close friends. Zarathix had been designing a ring that would fit his small human finger. Then came the mission to the outer edge of their space. Strange signals had been coming from empty systems where no ship should be. Jake had volunteered to investigate because his small fast ship could get there quickly and quietly. Zarathix had wanted to send a whole fleet, but Jake had convinced her that one ship would be less likely to cause trouble if the signals turned out to be from some new alien race. "I'll be back in 2 weeks, Jake had promised as he kissed her goodbye. "Then we can start planning that wedding." She had watched his ship disappear into faster-than-light travel. 12 days later, her sensors had picked up a massive explosion, right where Jake's ship should have been. The blast had been so bright it lit up her bridge like a tiny sun. When the light faded, there had been nothing left but empty space and radiation. Commander Thexani had run every scan possible. They had sent search teams to look for survivors or wreckage. They had found nothing at all. Whatever had destroyed Jake's ship had been so powerful it had turned everything to energy and scattered it across light years of space. Now Zerethix spent her days staring at his picture and remembering his voice. Her empire still ran because her people were loyal and smart, but she knew they were worried about her. Production had slowed on many worlds. New trade agreements sat unsigned on her desk. Her military leaders came to her with reports and plans, but she could barely focus on their words. The worst part was the dreams. Every night she dreamed that Jake was still alive somewhere calling for her help. She would wake up reaching for him and find only empty air. The doctors said grief was normal and that time would heal her pain. They did not understand that Jake had not just been her mate. He had been the first being in her long life who had seen her as more than just a queen or a political ally or something to be feared. Thexani knocked on her door, bringing the daily reports. Zerethix did not want to look at them, but she had duties to her people. As she turned away from Jake's picture, she whispered the same words she said every day. I love you, Jake Miller, and I will never forget you. The alarm sounds on the Valthari flagship made everyone run to their stations. Zerethix rushed from her private room, still wearing her sleeping robes. On the main bridge, her officers were staring at their screens with looks of confusion and fear. Commander Thexani met her at the entrance with worry in her 4 eyes. My queen, Thexani said quickly, something is happening in the space right in front of our fleet. The quantum sensors are detecting readings we have never seen before. Zerethix looked at the main viewing screen and felt her heart stop beating. Space itself was twisting and bending like water in a storm. Colors that had no names swirled in patterns that hurt to look at directly. The fabric of reality was tearing open right before their eyes. Get the fleet back, she ordered. Move all ships to safe distance now. Her captains were already giving those orders, but whatever was happening was spreading faster than their ships could move. The twisted space grew larger and larger until it covered an area bigger than most planets. Strange energies danced across its surface like lightning made of pure thought. Then something began to come through. It was a ship, but not like any ship Zerethix had ever seen. The hull was dark metal that seemed to drink light instead of reflecting it. Organic-looking tubes and wires covered its surface, pulsing with energy that made her skin tingle even from this distance. Weapons she could not identify jutted out from every angle, glowing with power that her sensors could not measure. The strangest thing was the size. The ship was huge, at least 10 times bigger than it should be. Zerethix knew that shape even changed as it was. She had watched it disappear into space 3 months ago, carrying the only person she had ever truly loved. That's Jake's ship, she whispered. That's the Pioneer. Thexani checked her readings 3 times before speaking. My queen, the energy signature matches Captain Miller's vessel, but the size and configuration are completely different. This should not be possible. More ships were coming through the twisted space. Human vessels, all of them, but changed like Jake's ship. They were bigger and stranger, with the same organic modifications and impossible weapons. The small human exploration fleet had become something that could challenge the entire Valthari Navy. Zerethix activated her personal communicator with hands that shook so badly she could barely work the controls. Jake, she said into the device. Jake, please answer me. Static filled the channel for long seconds. Then she heard a voice that made her knees go weak with relief and joy and terror all at the same time. Hello, beautiful, Jake said, but his voice sounded different. It was deeper and richer, like it was coming from somewhere far away and very close at the same time. Permission to come aboard. We have a lot to talk about. Granted, Zerethix managed to say. Teleport directly to my throne room. Actually, Jake said with something like laughter in his strange new voice, I think I'll use the shuttle bay. You're going to want to see this. The shuttle that docked with her flagship was like everything else about Jake's return. It looked like his old small transport, but bigger and covered with the same organic modifications. When the airlock opened, Jake stepped out wearing his usual human clothes and that crooked smile she remembered so well. but he was different. Power radiated from him like heat from a fire. His brown eyes held depths that seemed to contain entire galaxies. When he moved, the air around him shimmered with energy that made her sensors go crazy. He looked exactly like the Jake she had fallen in love with, but also like something far more than human. "Zara," he said, walking toward her with his arms open. "I missed you so much." She ran to him, forgetting all royal dignity, and threw her 6 arms around his small human body. When their skin touched, energy flowed between them, ancient and vast and wonderful. She could feel his love for her, but also something else. Power beyond anything she had ever imagined, and knowledge that stretched across time and space. "You're supposed to be dead," she said, holding him tight and never wanting to let go. "I saw your ship explode. We searched for weeks and found nothing." Jake held her close, and she could feel his heart beating steady and strong. "I was dead, Zara, for about 30 seconds. Then I got better. Turns out the universe had other plans for us." Through the windows of her throne room, she could see more ships appearing from the twisted space. Human vessels, but transformed like Jake's into something that belonged in no known technology database. Her fleet was backing away, giving the newcomers room, but she could see her captains were ready to fight if needed. "Jake," she said, pulling back to look at his face, "what happened to you?" "What happened to all of you?" He smiled and touched her cheek with one warm hand. "It's a long story, love. The short version is that what looked like an explosion was actually a doorway. I got pulled into a place that exists between dimensions where I met some very old friends of the universe. They've been waiting for the right time to make contact, and apparently that time is now." "What kind of friends?" Zarathix asked, though part of her was afraid to know the answer. "The ones who planted the seeds of life in this galaxy millions of years ago," Jake said. "They call themselves the Architects, and they've been watching every species that ever learned to reach for the stars. They've been waiting for one race that could do something no other species has ever managed." "What could humans do that we cannot?" she asked. Jake's smile grew wider and sadder at the same time. "Fall in love with aliens," he said. "Really, truly fall in love, not just political marriages or treaties of convenience. Love that changes both people into something better than they were apart." He gestured toward the window where his transformed fleet waited in the darkness. "Every human out there volunteered for this, Zara. Every one of them had formed a real bond with someone from another species. That connection made them compatible with architect technology in ways they never expected." "Are you still human?" she asked, touching his face with trembling fingers. "More human than ever," Jake said. "I can still taste coffee, and I still think your laugh is the most beautiful sound in the universe. I just have better tools now to protect the things I care about." Outside, more ships were emerging from the dimensional rift. Not just human vessels now, but ships from dozens of species, all transformed by the same impossible technology. The galaxy was about to change in ways no one could predict, and at the center of it all stood a human explorer and an alien queen whose love had somehow opened a door to powers beyond imagination. "There's something coming, Zara," Jake said, his voice growing serious. "Something that's been hunting civilizations across dimensions for millions of years. The Architects chose now to make contact because time is running out. We're going to need every ally we can get." Zarathix looked into his changed eyes and saw the truth there. Whatever was coming would test every bond between every species in the galaxy. But she also saw love there, unchanged and eternal despite all the power flowing through him. "Then we'll face it together," she said. "Like we always have?" In the quiet of her private chambers, Zarathix held Jake's hand and listened to the most incredible story she had ever heard. His skin felt warm and familiar, but energy flowed beneath it like lightning in his veins. The Jake she loved was still there, but he had become something far greater during his 3 months away. "When my ship hit that quantum storm," Jake began, "I thought I was going to die. The hull was breaking apart and all my systems were failing. Then everything went white, and I found myself somewhere else entirely." He showed her images on a small device that appeared in his palm. The pictures showed a place that existed between dimensions where geometry made no sense and time moved in circles. Massive structures floated in golden light built by minds that thought in ways no normal being could understand. The architects have been waiting there for millions of years, Jake continued. They're the ones who planted the first seeds of consciousness in our galaxy back when most stars were still forming. Every species that ever developed space travel has been part of their plan. Zarathix studied the images with growing wonder and fear. The beings in the pictures were tall and made of pure energy with forms that shifted like living thought. They moved through their impossible city like dancers performing a ritual that had been going on since the beginning of time. They told me our galaxy is just one of thousands, Jake said. And every few million years something breaks through from outside reality to consume entire dimensions. They call them the Devourers, and they're coming here soon. The next images made Zarathix feel cold despite Jake's warmth beside her. The Devourers looked like living shadows that existed partially in normal space and partially somewhere else. They moved through star systems like a plague, eating everything they touched and leaving only empty void behind. Why haven't the architects stopped them before? She asked. Jake's expression grew sad. They tried for billions of years. Every time the Devourers appeared, they fought them with all their power and technology. Sometimes they won and sometimes they lost, but they could never destroy them completely. The Devourers always came back, stronger and hungrier. He touched her face gently with his free hand. That's why they needed something new, a species that could do more than just fight. They needed beings who could transform not just themselves, but reality itself through the power of connection. You mean love? Zarathix said, understanding beginning to dawn. Not just any love, Jake replied. Love that crosses species barriers. Love that sees past physical differences and cultural divides to find the person underneath. Every time a human has fallen in love with an alien, it sends ripples through quantum space. Those ripples have been building for decades. Jake showed her recordings of the transformation process. Human volunteers had merged with architect technology, becoming beings of flesh and energy and pure thought. They kept their human hearts and minds, but gained the ability to manipulate reality at the most basic level. The architects learned that consciousness shapes the universe more than matter or energy, Jake explained. When two different species truly bond, their combined awareness becomes something greater than the sum of its parts. That's the weapon the Devourers can't defend against. Zarathix thought about her own people and their long history. The Velthari had made alliances with many species, but always for practical reasons. Trade agreements and military treaties and scientific exchanges, but never the deep personal connections that humans seem to form so easily. Your people are different from everyone else in the galaxy, she said. Most species stay with their own kind. Even when we work together, we maintain distance. Jake nodded. That's exactly what the architects noticed. Humans don't just adapt to hostile environments, we transform them into homes. We don't just use tools, we make them part of ourselves. And we don't just form alliances, we create families that cross every boundary. He stood and walked to the window where his transformed fleet waited in the darkness. Each ship pulsed with organic energy and weapons that operated on principles beyond normal physics. The humans aboard them had volunteered to become something new for the sake of protecting everything they loved. Every person in that fleet formed a bond with someone from another species, Jake said. Captain Lisa Sheen fell in love with a crystalline being from the Andorian colonies. Commander Steve Parker married a gaseous entity from the Nebula worlds. Lieutenant Tony Garcia has been dating a hive mind representative for 2 years. Zarathix joined him at the window, feeling the weight of revelation settling on her shoulders. And us. Our love opened the door for all of this. We were the first to make the connection strong enough for the architects to notice, Jake confirmed. When I told them about you and how you made me want to be better than I was, they knew humanity was ready. The transformation had given Jake and his people incredible abilities. They could fold space-time to travel instantly across vast distances. They could phase through solid matter or become pure energy when needed. Their ships could regenerate from almost any damage, and their weapons could strike targets that existed partially outside normal reality, but the most important change was harder to see. The transformed humans had gained the ability to strengthen the bonds between different species. Their presence made communication easier and trust deeper. Fear and suspicion faded when they were near, replaced by understanding and cooperation. The Devourers feed on isolation and despair, Jake explained. They corrupt civilizations by making them turn against each other. But they can't touch beings who are connected by love. That's why the architects needed us. A communication signal chimed, and Jake answered it with a thought. Admiral Kate Sullivan's image appeared in the air, showing a stern woman with gray hair and kind eyes. Behind her, Zarathix could see the bridge of a massive human warship that looked nothing like the vessels she knew. "Jake," the Admiral said, "we're getting reports from the outer systems. Something is happening near the galactic edge. Entire star systems are going dark." Jake's expression grew grim. "How many systems?" 17 so far, Admiral Sullivan replied. "No distress calls, no survivors. Nothing left but expanding zones of absolute void. If this is what I think it is, we're running out of time." After the communication ended, Jake turned to Zarathix with determination in his changed eyes. "The Devourers are already here. They're testing our defenses, learning our weaknesses before the main assault begins." Zarathix felt fear grip her hearts, but also something else. For the first time since Jake's apparent death, she felt hope. Whatever was coming, they would face it together. The bond between them had already changed the galaxy in ways no one could have predicted. "What do we do now?" she asked. Jake smiled, that crooked smile she loved so much. "Now we do what humans do best. We make friends and we fight for our family. The architects gave us the tools, but the choice of how to use them is still ours." Outside the window, more ships were arriving through dimensional rifts. Not just human vessels now, but Velthari ships and vessels from dozens of other species, all being transformed by contact with architect technology. The galaxy was uniting in ways that had never been possible before. The age of isolation was ending, and the age of connection was about to begin. The Great Council chamber aboard Zarathix's flagship had never held so many different species at one time. Representatives from every major government in the galaxy sat around the massive circular table, while Jake stood at the center explaining what they all faced. His transformed human appearance drew nervous glances, but his calm voice and honest manner gradually won over even the most suspicious delegates. Admiral Kate Sullivan represented Earth's unified fleet, and she had brought General Rex Harrison from the Colonial Defense Force. The Crystalline Confederacy had sent Ambassador Shimtar, whose diamond body reflected the room's lights in rainbow patterns. Even the mysterious gas lords had sent a representative in the form of a swirling cloud, contained in a portable atmosphere suit. "The Devourers have destroyed 17 star systems in the past week," Jake reported. "Our long-range sensors show them massing at the galactic edge in numbers we can't accurately count. They're not just raiders or conquerors. They're a force that exists to consume everything that lives or thinks or dreams." Senator Paul Warren from Earth's Planetary Assembly stood up with anger written across his weathered face. "And your solution is to turn humanity into something alien. How do we know this isn't some elaborate trick to conquer us from within?" Jake remained patient despite the accusation. "Senator, I can still remember my mother's apple pie, and I still get annoyed when people don't signal before changing lanes in traffic. The architect technology enhanced our abilities, but it didn't change who we are at heart." To demonstrate, Jake gestured toward the viewing screen. His ship, the Transformed Pioneer, appeared outside the window and began a complex series of maneuvers. It folded space around itself to appear in multiple locations at once, then phased through a nearby asteroid without disturbing a single piece of rock. Energy beams lanced out from its weapons, striking practiced targets with perfect precision, while defensive shields deflected simulated attacks that would have vaporized any normal vessel. "These are not weapons of conquest," Jake explained as his ship returned to formation. "They're tools of protection designed specifically to fight enemies that exist partially outside our reality." General Harrison leaned forward with professional interest. What kind of tactical advantages do your people have against these devourers? We can track them through dimensional space, Jake answered. Normal sensors see them as empty void, but our enhanced perception shows their true forms. We can also phase our attacks to strike them in dimensions where they're vulnerable. Captain Lisa Chun materialized beside Jake using the same teleportation technology that had brought him aboard. Her appearance caused several delegates to reach for weapons, but she simply smiled and nodded politely to the assembly. Captain Chun has been working with Velthari tactical specialists, Jake continued. Show them what we've learned. Chun activated a holographic display showing the recent battles with Devour Scouts. The transformed human ships moved through the combat zone like dancers weaving between attacks that would have destroyed any normal fleet. Their weapons created cascading energy patterns that disrupted the Devourer's ability to phase between dimensions. The key is coordination, Chun explained. Individual ships can hurt them, but coordinated attacks from multiple vessels can actually destroy them completely. The more species we have working together, the more effective our strikes become. Lord, Commander Nexus of the Velthari spoke for the first time since the meeting began. His tall silver form radiated skepticism as he addressed the assembly. This technology represents a fundamental shift in galactic power. How do we know the transformed humans won't use these abilities against the rest of us once the Devourer threat is eliminated? Zarathix rose from her throne with regal authority. Because, Commander, I have worked closely with Captain Miller and his people for months now. Their enhanced abilities seem to make them more concerned with protection than conquest. Every transformed human I have met shows increased empathy and desire for cooperation. She gestured toward Jake with obvious affection. The architect technology doesn't just give them new weapons. It strengthens their connections to others across species lines. They become more human, not less. Ambassador Shimtar's crystalline voice chimed like wind bells. The Crystalline Confederacy has analyzed the quantum signatures of the transformed vessels. The energy patterns match those of deep emotional bonds between different species. This suggests their power truly does come from connection rather than domination. More evidence came from Captain Steve Parker, whose ship had been monitoring the outer systems. His vessel appeared on screen showing recordings of Devourer attacks. Entire planets simply vanished, leaving behind expanding spheres of absolute nothingness that consumed light itself. They're not just destroying matter, Parker reported. They're consuming the quantum information that defines reality. Where they past nothing can ever exist again. No life, no thought, no possibility of anything. The recordings silenced the last skeptics. Whatever political concerns they might have about transformed humans paled before the evidence of total annihilation approaching their galaxy. General Harrison stood with military decisiveness. What do you need from us? Jake's expression grew serious. Complete integration of all military forces. The Devourers have been studying isolated civilizations for millions of years. They know how to turn species against each other and exploit our differences. Only united can we stand against them. Over the following days, the greatest military alliance in galactic history took shape. Velthari biotechnology merged with architect-enhanced human systems, creating ships that were part machine, part living organism, and part pure energy. The crews became mixed species teams with humans and aliens, working together at levels of integration never before achieved. Lieutenant Tony Garcia found himself partnering with a three-armed Velthari engineer named Crickstal. They developed a sign language that combined human gestures with Velthari color changes, allowing them to communicate complex technical concepts instantly. Chief Engineer Amy Foster worked with gas-form beings from the nebula worlds to create new propulsion systems that could function in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The transformation wasn't limited to technology. Wherever the enhanced humans went, cooperation flourished. Ancient grudges between species began to fade as beings who had never trusted each other found themselves working toward common goals. Fear and suspicion gave way to understanding and friendship, but not everyone welcomed the changes. Senator Warren continued to argue that humanity was losing its essential nature. Similar factions arose among other species, claiming that integration with alien cultures was weakening their racial purity. These voices of division grew stronger as reports arrived of more systems falling to the DVOURS. The breaking point came when long-range sensors detected the main Devourer fleet beginning its advance into the galaxy. It was a force beyond anything the Alliance had imagined. Thousands of shadow ships that existed in multiple dimensions, simultaneously supported by creatures of living void that consumed reality itself. They'll reach the first inhabited systems in 72 hours, Admiral Sullivan reported during an emergency council session. All our preparations come down to this. Jake stood before the assembled leaders of dozens of species and spoke with quiet conviction. The architects told me that love is the strongest force in the universe because it creates rather than destroys. Every friendship formed across species lines, every alliance built on trust rather than fear, every act of compassion shown to a foreign mind makes us stronger. He looked around the room, meeting the eyes of beings from worlds he had never seen. The Devourers expect us to fight as separate armies protecting separate interests. Instead, we're going to show them something they've never encountered before. A galaxy united not by conquest but by choice. Outside the windows of the flagship, mixed crews were making final preparations. Human tactical officers worked alongside crystalline navigators while Velthari weapons specialists collaborated with gas-form engineers using translation protocols developed in the past week. The sight would have been impossible just months ago, but now it seemed as natural as breathing. The age of division was ending and the age of unity was about to be tested in the fires of war. The combined fleet stretched across space like a living constellation of hope and determination. Over 3,000 ships from dozens of species hung in formation waiting for the enemy. That would determine the fate of their galaxy. Jake stood on the bridge of the new flagship, Harmony watching as Captain Lisa Chung coordinated with her Velthari counterpart Sub-Commander Crystal using the fluid communication methods they had developed during weeks of preparation. Enemy contacts appearing at Grid 77 Alpha, Shun reported as reality began to tear open along the galactic edge. Initial count shows over 5,000 vessels, but the numbers keep changing as they phase in and out of normal space. Zerathix moved to Jake's side, her 6 arms working multiple control panels simultaneously. As Supreme Commander of the United Fleet, she had adapted remarkably to working with transformed humans and integrated alien crews. Her own biology had been enhanced through careful symbiosis with architect technology, allowing her to interface directly with the quantum communication networks that linked every ship in the fleet. "All vessels report ready," she announced, her voice carrying across subspace to reach every captain and crew member in the massive armada. "This is the moment we have prepared for. Today we fight not as separate species but as one people united by bonds stronger than fear." The Devourers emerged from dimensional rifts like living nightmares given form. They were creatures of absolute void that existed partially in normal space and partially in dimensions where matter and energy had no meaning. Their ships were not built but grown from crystallized emptiness that consumed light itself. As they advanced, reality seemed to sicken and die around them, leaving expanding zones of nothingness where nothing could ever exist again. Jake felt the enhanced awareness that came with his transformation, reaching out to touch the minds of every enhanced human in the fleet. They were still individuals, but they could share thoughts and coordinate actions with perfect precision. Through that network, he could sense the fear and determination of beings from worlds he had never seen, all united in defense of everything they held dear. First wave incoming. Lieutenant Tony Garcia reported from his station where he worked seamlessly with 3 different alien specialists. They're targeting the outer perimeter ships with some kind of reality distortion weapon. The battle began with the Devourers launching attacks that simply erased sections of space-time. Normal shields were useless against weapons that attacked the fundamental structure of existence itself. But the transformed human ships could phase partially out of reality to avoid the worst effects while striking back with weapons that functioned. Across multiple dimensions. Commander Steve Parker's vessel led the first assault, diving through a formation of devourer ships while phasing in and out of normal space. His weapons created cascading energy patterns that disrupted the enemy's ability to maintain coherent form in any single dimension. Behind him, a mixed squadron of human and Valthari ships followed his lead, their attacks perfectly coordinated through the quantum communication network. Direct hit on enemy flagship, reported Captain Maria Santos as her ship emerged from a successful strike run. The target is destabilizing across multiple dimensions, but it's still functional. The Devourers responded by unleashing creatures of pure void that existed as living tears in reality. These beings moved through the fleet, consuming everything they touched and leaving expanding holes in space where entire ships simply ceased to exist. Normal weapons passed harmlessly through them, but the enhanced human crews could track their movement through dimensional space and strike them in the dimensions where they maintained physical form. Chief Engineer Amy Foster worked with her multi-species team to coordinate defensive measures. Her ship's living hull could regenerate from almost any damage, while energy shields created by merging human technology with alien science deflected attacks that operated on principles beyond normal physics. Around her, other mixed crews were performing similar miracles of cooperation and innovation. The key breakthrough came when Jake realized that the Devourer's greatest strength was also their weakness. They existed across multiple dimensions simultaneously, but this meant they needed to maintain coherent consciousness in all those dimensions at once. The enhanced humans could disrupt that coherence by creating what Jake called resonance attacks. All ships coordinate targeting on my mark, Jake broadcast across the fleet. We're going to hit them with every weapon we have synchronized to the same quantum frequency. The attack, when it came, was like nothing seen before in galactic warfare. 3,000 ships fired simultaneously, their weapons creating a web of energy that spanned light years. The combined assault resonated through dimensional space like a bell struck by a massive hammer. Devourer ships that had seemed invulnerable began to collapse as their multidimensional existence became unstable, but the enemy was not finished. The main Devourer fleet emerged from the deepest rifts in space-time, bringing with it creatures that defied description. These were beings that had consumed entire galaxies, and they radiated hunger that could be felt by every conscious mind in the Allied fleet. Several smaller ships began to retreat as their crews were overwhelmed by despair and terror. "Hold the line," Zarathix commanded, her voice carrying across every communication channel. "Remember what we fight for, remember the bonds that unite us." Jake felt something shifting in the quantum networks that connected the Allied fleet. The fear was still there, but it was being balanced by something stronger. Love and friendship and loyalty were flowing between species that had never trusted each other before. Human determination merged with Valthari wisdom and crystalline clarity and dozens of other unique perspectives to create something greater than the sum of its parts. The enhanced humans began to glow with soft light as their connection to the architect technology deepened, but they were not alone. Every being in the Allied fleet was part of the network, now sharing strength and courage and hope across the barriers that had once divided them. The Devourers had expected to face isolated civilizations fighting for their own survival. Instead, they encountered a united galaxy fighting for each